Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. My name is Mike Shablaski. I'm Executive Director with Transform Rockford. We're partnering tonight with R1 Planning Council for this evening to discuss the bicycle and pedestrian plan for our region. Thank you for many of you. I'm sure were out here last year as we talked about this, and now we're going to get an update on the work, talk about next steps with our partners. I just want a moment about what is Transform Rockford. It's a regional movement. We fundamentally, at the core, those that are involved believe in the greatness within this region and in its residents. We believe at the center of all of our work, we hold four things in particular close to us, and that is our region's shared vision, that of being, in summary, a top 25 community. There is that potential, the assets. There is shared values, common way of working together, and that we believe in doing things in a manner with broad engagement, where we include the people who are affected in the work along the way in our community's work, and to consider best practices in all things that we do. Tonight's work is, as you see on the, may see on the agenda, is to discuss the plan for bicycling and pedestrian improvements. It's more than physical infrastructure. I want to talk about this. This is more than just what we maybe see on a regular basis. This is at its core. This is about moving people, connecting people to opportunities and assets that they have, that they value, they wish to be connected to. It could be education, it could be employment, it could be arts, it could be recreation. It's part of what makes for a fulfilling life and an enjoyable region. It's more than just effectively moving people around, but doing it in a way that is pleasing and helps to define what it is that is our region and makes this a great community in itself. So along with that, we have to think about other things that our community is defined in its vision, challenge one another to hold to that. This is, again, about connecting. Things like our neighborhoods need to be interconnected with one another. We have to do this in a manner that is safe. We still, not only in our community, but across America, have too many issues where bicycles and pedestrians do not always safely share common spaces with automobiles and other vehicles. We have to get good at that. As I said, at the core of this, what's fun is to keep you all and the community involved in all this. And I really want to salute the R1 Planning Council for agreeing to do this, for helping to set a standard and an expectation that as our community develops its plans, we're going to keep that at our heart, that what it is that really matters is your satisfaction, your support, and to continue to provide the input and the feedback that makes all the planning better. So, then I want to give a shout out to the Region 1 Planning Council, which is a pretty new animal. I think last year we were talking about the Metropolitan Agency for Planning. It's evolved. We still have the Agency for Planning, and maybe we'll hear a little bit about the evolution of the organization. But this is part of our community becoming a great community. We're thinking more regionally. We're bringing on tools and great people to get the work done, and partnering with other organizations to make this stuff happen. As I said, it's an exciting time because we have a lot of things happening, and just think a moment as we talk about these plans, a lot of new assets coming online in our community, and how are they getting connected with one another? We have wonderful things like a new hotel. We have hopefully Barbara Coleman soon, and a variety of things that we need to be connected with, and how will that be from a variety of modes of transportation? It's okay. I mean, some of these, in prior years, we were talking about some of this as dreams. Well, we're starting to see some of these things come to reality. Now, some of this we're talking about tonight is how these assets that are coming to be, how they're interconnected. And nobody better to bring forward right now than the leader of the Region 1 Planning Council, the Executive Director with them, to talk a little bit more about it and what we're up to tonight. And Michael Dunn. Thank you.
Thanks to Transform Rockford for helping us get tonight together and having all of you here so we can better present what we've been working on. I have John Paul Diepla here, who is the director of what is RMAP, the Rockford Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and I'll turn it over to him quickly. But to give you an update on what is a regional planning council and how does that work with what we've traditionally done. We've been on a 2-year journey to create a new regional framework for governance. policy setting and basic planning operations throughout Ogle County, Stevenson County, Winnebago County, Boone County, and at times, depending on the project, McHenry County. That has evolved into a seating of a council of policymakers throughout that defined region starting last December. They sat for the second time and met just last week. And the goal is to get those regional leaders around the table to better understand what targets every small city or county or large city have to strive for to create a benefit for the entire region. If a company operates and opens up in one city and that requires a lot of funding of infrastructure to get that company to locate, how does that location of that company help neighboring communities? Because employment, commerce, they do not respect municipal or county lines. And so how do we come together as a region, have an accounting of shared assets? What are our assets? In my mind, in the geography I just described, Chrysler's an asset, NIU and Rock Valley College are assets, the intermodal in Rochelle is an asset, Rockford Airport's an asset. So how do we tie those big economic assets together in a concerted strategy? And then couple that with how do we set a list of priorities for the region? How do we take all the good work done in Rockford, all the good work done in Boone County, all the good work done in Freeport, and come up with a regional priority list that we then work with our state legislators on our congressional delegation with? And how do we set that priority list where we, as representing 1 million people, can speak with one voice on what we think are our biggest strategic priorities? So the Regional Planning Council, again, is something that is relatively new as far as operating. But the staff that make it up, John Paul being one of them, Sydney Turner, who you'll hear from later tonight, a second, that staff is not new. They've all been working in these sub-entities, RMAP traditionally being one of them, that we've brought together and combined for this larger effort. If you have any further questions about this, because I think we're going to hear a lot of good conversation tonight, feel free to pull me off to the side. Happy to grab a coffee with you to better explain what we're trying to do. We have a lot of Regional Planning Council staff in the back row there, back table. Feel free to ask them too. All our staff that are here tonight are very proud of what we're doing, and they've all had a hand in what we're about to talk about tonight. With that, I'll let John Paul give you a quick summary on why we do a bike ped plan and who do we do it for and who do we present it to.
Good evening. My name is John Paul Diepla, and I'm the Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Region 1 Planning Council. And a Metropolitan Planning Organization is commonly referred to as an MPO. And to provide some background on the MPO function, we're required to conduct short and long-range transportation planning on a regional level. Our particular planning area encompasses portions of Boone, Ogle, and Winnebago counties. And the MPO itself works with local municipal government and special units of government as well, in addition to state and federal transportation partners, with the overall goal to coordinate a multimodal transportation planning process. And I mentioned the word multimodal. I'd like to explain what that means. So think of that as the various types of transportation: bicycle and pedestrian, public transit, roadway, highway, and freight movements are to name a few. Now, the goal of this coordination process with the MPO is to develop and maintain a transportation system that connects the various modes of transportation to provide a safe and efficient movement of people and goods throughout our region. As Mike had mentioned, there are a number of jurisdictions that are part of the RPC to provide the partner organizations that are part of the MPO Policy Committee. Our organization is established through a cooperative agreement between Boone and Winnebago counties, the cities of Belvedere, Loves Park, and Rockford, the Village of Machesney Park, the Illinois Department of Transportation, and the Rockford Mass Transit District. So to provide a little bit of an example of the types of plans that we work on a regional basis for transportation, the primary one is our overarching document, which is known as the Regional Long-Range Transportation Plan. And that document really looks at the modes of transportation that we all use day to day, being citizens, businesses. Not only does it catalog the current conditions of the transportation network, but it also looks at what the needs are of our region from a transportation perspective for the next 20 to 30 years. We're actually going to begin the update process to that here shortly. Another document that I'd like to note, tying in other modes of transportation, is the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan. That primarily links the public transit option with workforce and service accessibility. And what we're here to talk about tonight is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, and that document really focuses in on alternative transportation, active and non-motorized forms of getting around the region. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Sydney Turner, who's our Metro Program Manager, to discuss some further detail on the recommendations of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. Thank you.
The blue area is where we cover, so as you can see, it's not quite as extensive as all 3 counties, but we do cover quite a good portion of the urbanized areas. So what I'm here to talk about tonight is planning for the future, which we accomplished. It was adopted by our policy committee of those 8 entities that John Paul mentioned back in September. And basically what this plan is really providing is a vision of where we want to go for in the future. The vision that was created for this plan was based off of a Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It took representatives of different organizations, advocacy groups, interested citizens, brought them to the table and really looked at what is needed in our region, what we want to look like in 20 years. The vision that was created was the Rockford metropolitan area envisions a community provided with a diverse and safe active transportation network of interconnected, continuous, and accessible system of sidewalks, bicycle facilities, and trails throughout the region. This network will foster a culture of safety, health, awareness, and recreation to enhance the quality of life for both residents and visitors through promoting active transportation alternatives. The committee met a total of 4 times to discuss vision, goals, and the objectives of the plan. The goals, there are 5 total, which will be discussed further through our recommendations. They include safety, infrastructure, collaboration, funding, and the final one is 4 E's. It's education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation. These goals will relate directly back to the recommendations that we have in the plan. So kind of to give you a background of the plan itself, this is a follow-up to a 2008 document that RMAP created. It was a year-long process, and it began with a community survey. This survey was just to gather information of where our weaknesses and strengths in our community related to bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Through that year-long process, we went through a lot of quantitative and qualitative data. One of my coworkers says it took 6 months to do 1 tool, which is partly my fault. But the result of that was inputting this data we can use in the future, and it will really help drive where we go and where we can see we need demand for bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Finally, we did a presentation to IDOT in 2016, as well as a community conversation last year in the same exact format and location in February. So what do our numbers look like in our region? So for bicycle facilities, we have 110.3 miles of shared use paths. I want to remind you that is the blue portion of our region, so it's not including anything in the remaining portions of the county. As of last year, we had 228.5 miles of proposed shared use paths. These proposed shared use paths have showed up somewhere in one of our planning documents, in a partner agency planning document, such as a capital improvement program, as well as statewide programs. We have 7 miles of designated bike routes. A bike route has a sign, or no, it could be unsigned. Basically, it's just a way to have people say, these are the best routes to get to where you need to go. It's the safest possible route. As of last year, we also have 5.7 miles of designated on-street bike lanes. As far as sidewalks, we have 1,233 miles of existing sidewalks. For the plan, we only looked at 700 of these, roughly. Mainly, we looked at the areas that were not rural. So really focusing in on major roadways, where people would, which sidewalks people would use to get to places they need to go, such as public transit, hospitals, things of that nature. And then 69% of the roadways do not have sidewalks, and that one does include the suburban and rural areas. So we still have a long way to go. So really what I want to focus in on tonight is, how do we achieve this vision? So we have a planning document, so how do we move it from just a planning document into actual implementing and creating that vision? So I know this is a little difficult to see. These are all of the recommendations that we have. Our recommendations focused on the 5 E's of a bicycle and pedestrian-friendly community. So we have engineering, education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation. These recommendations are meant to act as a guide of the region and not necessarily the exact items that we need to do. They're more representative. So in total, there are 2 chapters with recommendations. We divide it into engineering and then the remaining 4 E's. And this is because there's a lot of different engineering and infrastructure items that we can implement in the region that will create a bicycle-friendly community. So I'm going to go over a couple of the recommendations. I will not go through all of them. Some of the highlights of the plan as far as the engineering recommendations include a complete street policy. This isn't necessarily a physical infrastructure, it's more of a policy that will guide the physical infrastructure for our region. And there are several communities that already have complete streets policies, so what we're really looking at is making sure that all of the communities in our region have one, as well as a regional policy. So what is a complete street? It's really looking at increasing the area in which people move in. It's not just looking at the single occupant vehicle roadway. It's looking at a street as a holistic approach, and making sure there's sidewalks, there's bus stops, there's bicycle routes and lanes, and really focusing in on that. The next major engineering recommendation we have is closing the gaps. We tried not to label it as increasing the amount of facilities we have. It's more looking at where can we fill in to make it a complete system, a complete network. The final one I'm going to talk about is addressing the first and last mile. The first and last mile is really focusing on connecting people to public transportation. The reason for this is because a large majority of people using public transportation need to get to the stop or the shelter. Therefore, we have to provide facilities in which they can utilize to get there. Otherwise, that first last mile is going to be the most difficult part of their trip. This can even discourage some people from using public transportation. If there's a missing sidewalk along, say, East State Street, a very busy street, it could prevent them from utilizing it. So really looking at those gaps in the bicycle network as well as the gaps in the sidewalk system. There is a map in the final document which shows all of the areas in which there is a missing sidewalk along public transit route. So now I'm going to go into the remaining, what we call 5 E's. These are the remaining 4 E's. The first E is education, and these are looking at programs that ensure the safety, comfort, and convenience of bicyclists, pedestrians, and fellow road users. Some of the recommendations include public awareness campaigns, bicycle rodeos, and resource websites. So today I'm going to focus in on the Ambassador Program. These have been successful in Fort Collins, Colorado, Salt Lake County, Appleton, Wisconsin, and Chicago. These are mainly volunteer-based groups that come together, decide that they want to improve their region through an ambassador program. So what they do is they offer education through various formats such as workshop, classes, and at events. And this is a way to really get out safety techniques as well as just promoting bicycling in the region. So Chicago has a unique program that I want to call out. It's their Junior Ambassadors Program, and this is a peer-to-peer bicycle and pedestrian safety education program. And what happens is students will register to be a part of it. They'll go through, I believe it's a 4 to 6 week course on bicycle safety, roadway safety, basically anything that they may need to continue forward with this. And then what they do is they go to parks, summer programs, other schools, and they present to their peers. So it's really educating through peer-to-peer involvement. I will not spend too much time on this because I know later in on our presentation we will be talking about bike share program. But a bike share program is part of the encouragement E. Encouragement provides incentives, promotions, and opportunities that inspire and enable people to bike or walk. Some of the recommendations in the plan include bike to work or school day, safe routes to school, bicycle valet parkings, and bike shares. In 2016, RMAP conducted a bike share feasibility study for the city of Rockford. Along with interested stakeholders and government agencies, we've been actively pursuing bringing a bike share program to Rockford and the surrounding communities. Bike share program is a point-to-point, traditionally a point-to-point system in which you rent a bike, you take it for a short ride, and then park it close to your final destination. From there, you can either get back on your bike, get the bike, rent it again, go to a different location, or you can use it to connect into public transit, things of that nature. Enforcement is one of the most interesting of the 5 E's. This deals with the equitable laws and programs that ensure motorists and bicyclists are held accountable. I want to emphasize that both motorists and bicyclists are held accountable. So this is really educating motorists the laws and rights of a bicyclist, right, particularly riding in the street, which is legal to do. But as well as making sure that bicyclists are aware of some of the laws that associated with that, such as no riding on a sidewalk. So recommendations in our program cover 2 different categories. We have law enforcement programs as well as community enforcement programs. Examples of law enforcement programs would be crosswalk enforcement campaigns, neighborhood speed watch programs. That one is actually a hybrid of the 2, so law enforcement working with community enforcement to really enable those neighborhood speed watch programs. Additionally, there are things such as pace car pledges, which one of my coworkers recently was really interested in. I won't talk about that one today, but if you are interested, each of these that I've listed are detailed within our plan. So the one that I'm going to talk about today is the Bicycle Light Campaign. This is a campaign that educates bicyclists about bicycle lights at night. In Illinois, we have a law that requires bicyclists to have a light on the front as well as a light on the back of their bicycle. So what these campaigns enable is it's a joint group between police departments as well as local bicycle advocates, and it's a light giveaway. At our last community conversation, one of the biggest comments or questions was, how do I safely ride at night? This gentleman was concerned that with the street lighting options in our region, or lack thereof in certain neighborhoods. And so when I was writing the plan and trying to look for these recommendations, that was in the back of my head, is how can we make individuals who feel like due to their own circumstances, they don't have a bicycle light, but they ride at night because that's their only mode of transportation. So this was one of those options of kind of identifying this is a program that we can help those people who live in areas that don't necessarily have street lights to safely ride at night. So the final E is evaluation. This isn't the most glamorous of the E's, but this is the processes that demonstrate a commitment to measuring results and planning for the future. This is, a lot of communities are getting national recognitions. There are two groups that designate a bicycle and pedestrian friendly community. So there is an application process they accept twice a year, and it is a checklist of what you are working on in your region or community that is improving bicycling or walking. So these are the bicycle friendly community is through the League of American Bicyclists, while the pedestrian friendly is called Walk Friendly Community. So they go through, some of the questions that they go through is what are the 5 E's that you're doing in your region, which is why we kind of focused our plan around those 5 E's, is to help us get this national recognition. There are 5 categories that can be awarded. So the first, or the highest level, is platinum, which is Madison. So if you've ever ridden your bicyclist or been a bicyclist in Madison, you can understand that they're the platinum. They're the highest that you can go. The next is gold. These are communities with strong bike cultures, but still need to improve their network, their physical network. Silver is what Chicago is. Somewhat welcoming to bicyclists and are easy to navigate, but need to work on 2 or 3 of the 5 E's. Bronze is the lowest of actually metal, I guess you could say, and it's DeKalb has a bronze as well as Schaumburg. They might not necessarily feel bike friendly, but are taking important steps in all 5 E's, particularly in 1 or 2 of the E's. The final designation is called an honorable mention, and these are designed for communities that are just starting to address their needs. Unfortunately, they don't have any examples of their honorable mentions, even though it's honorable. So the next portion is this. We have all these recommendations. So how do we take these recommendations in the planning process and move them into implementation? This is the last chapter of our document, and it's really focused on the action plan and funding of the bicycle network as well as sidewalks. So the action plan is a framework to turn the vision of the plan into reality. As I mentioned earlier, it is not meant to include all possible strategies, but rather identify solutions to our current problems. I know this is really difficult to see. There is a printout in the back of the room if you would like to see all of the action steps. To kind of give you a run through of how the plan is set up, it's an action step, the lead agency, which is illustrative. It might not necessarily fall on that entity to implement it. Supporting agencies and groups, as well as a time frame. The time frame is broken into 4 groups: short term, which is 1 to 2 years, mid-term, which is 3 to 5, long-term, 6 to 10, and then we have ongoing categories. These are the ones that will continually be going through the planning process or the implementation process. One of the biggest portions of the implementation section is the priority corridors. These serve as a guide and were determined based off of the feasibility of those corridors being suitable for pedestrians and bicyclists. This was a quantitative and qualitative analysis run through the Active Trans Priority Tool. The Active Trans Priority Tool was developed by the National Corporation of Highway Research Program. FHWA supports this program, which is why we tried implementing this tool, and it's the one that took us the longest to kind of do the internal process to run. What it does is it's a step-by-step methodology for prioritizing improvements to pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So you can run them as separate projects, which we did in our plan. We ran bicycle and pedestrian separately, or you can run corridors through this as a complete street, looking at all different aspects of it. In our methodology, it's flexible, so we were able to kind of choose what we thought was important for our region. So some of the categories that we included is connection into existing facilities. Is it already in an adopted plan or comprehensive plan, CIP, things of that nature? How many public comments did that particular corridor receive? We also looked at the safety of those roadways, so how many bicycle or pedestrian-related crashes were there? Does it show characteristics of a low stress street, which I'll get into the next slide? Our corridor, is this particular corridor high in population? Are there a lot of retail, public facilities, school in that area that would have a high demand? As well as, is there a high portion of children under 18, minority populations, and low-income populations? This list is not in any particular order or preference. This is, again, just what the priority tool kind of spit back out at us. If you look in the plan, it's in the very end portion of it. Okay, so when I mentioned those low stress, so there's a lot that goes in when looking at if a street or corridor is suitable for a bicycle lane. This is for both on-street and off-street, as well as sidewalks. These are all of the categories that engineers, planners, everyone looks at when trying to determine the feasibility of something. The considerations list is directly from IDOT's Bureau of Local Roads and Streets Manual. The level of service is from the Highway Capacity Manual, which is created by the Transportation Research Board. The Highway Capacity Manual includes an integrated multimodal approach to the analysis and evaluation of urban streets from the points of view of automobile drivers, transit passengers, bicyclists, and pedestrians. So it's really focusing on those complete street elements. So how do we go from action steps into who's responsible for it? I'm going to be covering 3 different roles or types of agencies. So the first one I'm going to cover is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is what we are, followed by government entities, and finally kind of advocacy groups and citizens. How can you get involved in the implementation of this plan? So the role of the MPO is really focusing in on the planning efforts, the regional policies, and funding of implementing the bicycle and pedestrian plan. I want to clarify when I say implementing, we're not an implementing agency in the sense that we are going to go construct a road. We're an implementing agency in the sense of here are the policies, here are some of the things that we can do as an agency. So some of the items that were identified in the action plan that we kind of take charge of is an alternative transportation committee. And I'm proud to say that this is actually going to be within the next few months. We'll have the alternative transportation committee. It will be going through our policy at our next board meeting. Additionally, complete streets policy will go back to that alternative transportation community, and that community will have a big say on what the policy will look like. We'll also support local entities that may not know what to put in a complete streets policy. We'll help kind of write their policy as well. We assisted in bringing a bike share program to our community, as well as determining long-term funding strategies and maintaining databases related to bicycle and pedestrian. The next group is the government agencies. So these are the agencies that are going to be responsible for the development, construction, and maintenance of the bicycle and pedestrian facilities, as well as dedicating funding to particular projects. Majority of the action items will fall onto these local municipalities and agencies. Additional ones that I may not have mentioned before is public-private partnerships to fund these programs. That's going to fall a large part on the local governments to figure out, as well as applying for those local bicycle and pedestrian-friendly designations with our support, of course. Other strategies from our plan include inclusion of active transportation projects in their capital improvement programs, as well as identifying traffic calming strategies. The final group that will play a role in the implementation of this plan are groups, advocacy groups, and citizens. These are the people who are going to be promoting biking and walking for everyday transportation through programs geared towards advocacy, awareness, and education. I want to say they play a huge role. They play one of the most important roles in this because they're the ones who are going to be making sure that bicycle and pedestrian issues and concerns are being addressed by the policymakers and assisting in developing these programs. They will assist in programs such as the bicycle light campaigns that I discussed, adopt a sidewalk, bus stop, or trail programs, walking and biking audits, promotion of walk and bike to work days, education outreach to school-age children, and assisting in the development of a regional biking map. So this is kind of the end of my presentation. We will go into funding. That will come a little bit later. So I'm going to have John Paul come back up to talk.
We'd like to bring up Jason Wild, who is the Regional General Manager for Lime Bike, to further discuss the Lime Bike Bike Share Program. Jason.
Thank you very much. So as John Paul alluded, my name is Jason Wild. I'm with Lime Bike. I'm the regional general manager for Lime Bike in the northern half of the United States. A little bit of a background on me. I've been with Lime Bike since our very first launch. I was part of launching South Bend, Indiana and Notre Dame. Went on to launch Washington, D.C. And for the last 4 months have been running Seattle until I recently hired my replacement. And now I'm in charge of the top half of the U.S. So I've experienced small cities, large cities with a lot of bikes, and large cities with very few number of bikes. So seen all parts. So what is Lime Bike? So we look at Lime Bike not just as a bike share, but as an urban mobility solution that's looking to move people around in more efficient manners. So we think obviously that it complements existing first and last mile transportation or existing transportation infrastructure that you guys have within the city, and we're looking at connecting and just being another part of the overall transportation puzzle. What sets us apart? One of the big things that sets us apart is we're no cost to the city. So traditional bike shares usually require some sort of a government subsidy, which is paid for by city tax dollars. That is not what we do. So we provide access to our mode of transportation free to the citizens, and only the individuals that use our service pay for it. As you can see, we have a pretty wide footprint in terms of where we operate. We started with a handful of operations rolling out first in Greensboro, North Carolina, then shortly after that in South Bend. Since then, in roughly 7 or 8 months, we find ourselves in over 45 cities all across the United States. So we've proven time and time again that bike share in the manner that we do it works successfully. A little bit of obviously background on how we do bike share also that does set us apart is we are what we call dock free. So the bikes themselves are smart. They have GPS on them and we can track them. So essentially you use an app to find the closest bike nearest you. go to it, unlock the bike, ride it to your final destination, and park it appropriately. So we have the ability with technology to incentivize people to park in preferred locations, but ultimately we're all about trying to not restrict people's transportation flow and allow them to follow natural patterns of transportation. We find that allowing people to do that actually makes the system more efficient as a whole, thus the reason we do not have to charge a subsidy to provide our service. Again, a little bit of how the service is used. Again, app-based currently, and download the app, sign up, create an account, provide payment information, and then again, find, locate, and unlock, and you're off. The bike itself, so we have multiple models, and depending on topography, will depend on exactly what model we roll out. But they are all ISO certified, very safe bikes, well-made bikes that are custom made to our specific specs. We offer a single-speed model. We offer a 3-speed and an 8-speed model. Affordable pricing. So pricing, just to give a high-level overview. So pricing for this, obviously subsidy-free from a city perspective, but from the user perspective, it's $1 to unlock a bike and ride for 30 minutes. We have monthly plans, student plans, low-income plans that actually reduce that as low as 15 to 30 cents per ride based on the plan that you sign up for. So again, significantly more affordable than a traditional dock-based system. At the very beginning, I alluded to us being multimodal, and so we do classic pedal bikes, but we also do a Lime E Assist bicycle. We look at that as an extension of first and last mile, so taking us from first and last mile connection, but then actually tapping into that trip that's a little bit farther in that 1 to 3 mile range, where it's a little bit too far for the average individual to hop on a bicycle, unless you're an avid cyclist already. But with the extra kick of electric assist, that can help you get farther easier, and for a lot of times more affordable than other forms of transportation to get you that same distance. Again, in addition to that, we have an electric scooter, which also again taps into that longer term 1 to 3 mile. So these are all parts of our overall mobility fleet that we are continuing to build out and bring to communities all across the United States to, again, try and change people to the way people move around cities, because that's our ultimate goal, is to make urban and non-urban transportation more efficient, and again, being another piece of the overall puzzle. So managing dockless operations, that's one of the things that most people have questions around. And so I'm in a unique position to be able to answer like the nitty-gritty operational stuff, since I've been around it since day one. So later on, if I don't touch on it, feel free to ask questions. But essentially, we look at our team a couple different ways. So we have the on-the-ground operations team that are going to go out. They're going to help make sure our bikes are in the right spots, where they need to be, in proper working order and parked appropriately. So there's kind of multiple team positions where people will actually patrol the city streets to make sure that bikes that are parked inappropriately are reparked. It's a way of conditioning our users to know what legitimately good parking looks like. And so time after time after time, reparking bicycles that are parked inappropriately, following up with those previous users, making sure that they know where to go from there. So operations is probably where we pride ourselves the most. It's the biggest part of what we do, in the sense that if a bike isn't where it needs to be when it needs to be there, then it's not actually solving the issue. So again, our approach to parking, we try and take it from take a look at it not only from the physical on the ground level in terms of how we can move bikes around physically and condition our users through consistently seeing it the right way, but also through technology. So we have the ability to put in place preferred parking locations. We actually have the ability to say these are non-parking locations, and then of course we have the ability to incentivize users to park in the preferred ones, and actually penalize users that park in the ones that they're not supposed to park in. So ultimately it's twofold. It's in real life, but it's also in technology, and I think both of them support each other. one of the most exciting things that I think ties into what everybody else talked about before me is, and one of the big things that sets us apart also, is we share our data with the community. So traditionally, infrastructure, you do a lot of educated guessing in terms of how people are going to move around on bicycles and as pedestrians. What we allow you to do is actually see that in real life and help you plan future infrastructure projects in a little more data-driven way. So as our bikes get utilized, they collect data, show where people start, where people end, but also the path in between because they're GPS capable. So we're able to provide aggregate information to community planners to help plan future infrastructure, which I think can be a huge boon to a community looking to continue to build out that type of infrastructure. Another thing that sets us apart, we invest in community. So what that means to us is, I think, we're a technology company that operates bicycles, but at the end of the day, we are a people company. So if we don't invest in the community that we operate in, if we don't invest in great relationships with key stakeholders, with community members that may not see eye to eye all the time with us and have those tough conversations, then we're ultimately not going to be successful. So when we say we invest in community, that means we are here to stay. We're here to be a part of the overall transportation infrastructure in your city, and we're excited to be a part of that community. And then just the minutia, we're experienced and funded. So we have money to back up our operations to make sure that we're able to be efficient. And we're experienced in the way, not necessarily from a dockless bike share operator, because dockless bike share has not necessarily been around for a long time, but we come from a wide breadth of transportation background. Past community planners. I personally was a part of previous bike share as well as car share companies, and so we have a breadth of knowledge that comes from years and years in transportation. I don't really have anything else. I know there will eventually be questions, so I'm going to hand it back to whoever I need to hand it back to, and then I'll hang up here through the panel when questions do arise. Thank you.
Joining us for the panel is Ian Lindenberry. Ian is an attorney with Reno Zom LLP, where he has practiced business law for over 15 years. He has been riding and racing bicycles his entire adult life, and he is passionate about improving the local environment for cyclists and pedestrians. Ian is president of the Rockford Park District Board of Commissioners and co-lead of Healthy Lifestyle Spoke of Transform Rockford. Ian is also chairman of the R1PC Environmental Committee. Next is Jennifer Smith. Jennifer is the Program and Membership Coordinator for the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. She has a bachelor's in elementary education and an MBA. Her interest in urban planning and active transportation is a hobby that has led to many opportunities for service and advocacy, including her role as lead for the Political Legal Committee of iBike Rockford. She believes improving walkability and bikeability is one of the best means of making Rockford a more equitable, healthy, and vibrant city. Her preferred ride is her 1976 Free Spirit with the attached milk crate. Next is Tim Bragg. Tim has 20 plus years in his urban planning career and has spent the last 10 years with the Rockford Park District as park planner, providing technical assistance with path and trail planning initiatives. Tim works regularly with local, county, and statewide agencies to further efforts on increasing the connectivity of the region's path and trail network. Efforts in recent years have included working with the City of Rockford and IDOT regarding efforts along Main Street, Illinois Route 2 corridor, particularly with path connectivity at South Park and Brown Park. And Tim has also worked with IDOT on the project to renovate the Jefferson Street Bridge underpass. Tim has a Bachelor's of Science in Urban Planning and a Master's of Public Administration. Next on our panel is Michael Stubbe. Michael is the Executive Director of the Rockford Mass Transit District and recently joined RMTD with over 22 years of public transit experience, working in transit operations management, safety, and transit planning. He has spent the last 11 years at the Chicago Transit Authority, where he recently served as Interim Vice President of Safety, Compliance, and Risk Management, and was responsible for the overall management of the CTA safety program. Prior to joining CTA, Michael worked for 11 years at the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District, where he held positions in bus operations management and planning. Michael, who grew up in the Freeport area, is a 1995 graduate of the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Urban and Regional Planning. So I'd like to welcome all of the panelists. Thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to be here tonight. In your opinion, this is for the entire panel, what do you see as the biggest bicycle or pedestrian-related strength in our region?
Who wants to go first? All right. Go ahead. No, I'll do that. So as John Paul noted, I'm president of the Rockford Park District Board of Commissioners, and I think one of the greatest strengths in our area for cycling is the strength of our parks and recreation facilities. Not only the Rockford Park District, of course I'm partial to that entity, but we've got the Winnebago County Forest Preserve as well. One of the things that people don't know about the area is that there are over 20,000 acres of open space in Winnebago County. That's a lot of open space, and you don't really think about that when you think about Winnebago County. At least I think most people don't. And so we have access to outdoor recreational amenities for cycling and other types of silent, human-powered sports on and off-road. And I think one of the things that the Park District does really well is pay attention to its networks of paths, recreational paths. Now, we recognize at the Rockford Park District that we have a connectivity problem, particularly as it relates to east-west thoroughfares, and that's something that we're cognizant of and that we're constantly working to improve. But those networks of paths and, the networks of paths, I think, are a very important asset for the community, for folks to get out and not only ride their bikes, but to walk, to rollerblade, to ski, to do other things. And I think that's a real unique strength that we have. Just one quick note, the Rockford Park District has a lot of fantastic amenities. I'm sure everyone in this room probably has a favorite park or a favorite Rockford Park District facility. We've got some beautiful facilities in the Sports Factory downtown, the brand new indoor sports center out at Sports Core 2, Magic Waters, our pools, our parks, our rec centers. But you know what the most visited amenity that we have in the entire Rockford Park District? It's our riverfront path. Over 900,000 people use that path every year. So we know how important that is. We pay attention to those user numbers. We pay attention to the user feedback that we get. And we recognize that recreational trends are changing, and some of those on the uptick are cycling and running, not only for exercise and recreation, but as a means of transportation. So again, we're cognizant of these changing recreational trends, and it is our priority to meet those trends for our residents.
I'll say two things. One is a great strength is a long-standing and growing contingent of folks who are interested in bicycling and having a more walkable community. Represented in the room here tonight, we've got lots of ages, people coming from all walks of life who do all types of cycling, and I think that portion of the population is growing, which is fantastic. Another great strength is we have no shortage of fantastic aspirational plans, not least the one that you're hearing about tonight that contain some really, significantly aspirational ideas for our community. And there's the comp plan, there's every city, municipality has their own plans as well. So there's lots of fantastic aspirations that I think if we can get those two pieces to meet in the middle, we'll be in good shape.
For me, from my perspective, I see our network of paths and trails as an opportunity to further collaborations between the various units of government, similar to roads, how most people may not know Road A is partially in this jurisdiction and then transforms over to another unit of another municipality. I think our paths and trail systems serve that purpose to our community as well. I know in recent years we've seen increasing amount of collaboration, intergovernmental agreements with our agency and with the municipality, county, and so we're pleased to see that, and we hope that will continue in years to come.
So a couple things that were mentioned before, the sheer amount of amenities in the community and the plans that go with that. And I think those two things, in view of a regional approach, to try to develop that connectivity that allows, those things to come together to create a very robust system. I think there's just great opportunity around that, and with opportunity, I think that really is a strength, that we have plans in place that can help us take a path forward. And so, yeah, that's the real strength I see where we're at this time.
Great. Well, thank you. So we heard a presentation on Lime Bike Share. I'd like to get your thoughts on what a bike share program means for the bicycling community, active transportation within the region, and how that ties into other modes such as public transit.
So maybe we should start with on my side. Here upon Lime Bike coming to the community 8 weeks ago, returning to the community, actually, I saw that as a tremendous opportunity. The linkages to increase mobility in the area, the concept of the first mile, last mile, providing a way to bridge that gap to get to a public transit route is incredibly important, especially based on kind of our current environment of less than ideal sidewalk conditions that allow pedestrians to have direct access to transit stops and bus routes. And so I see it as a real opportunity for the community to connect in and leverage both the bike system, bikes to connect into transit to help grow and develop our transit ridership in the community, which I think is part of the long-range transportation plan to increase the overall percentage of bikes, buses, and pedestrian trips is really incredibly important to the overall vibrancy of our community.
One of the things for me is that I see this as an opportunity for both people that are our youth, for example, that are out going to get that first job. They may not have the money saved up to have that first car. This gives them another opportunity to get from home to work. You may have an older person that's in transition, from a job standpoint, laid off, fired, whatever the case may be, and until they have the means and ability to have another vehicle, this gives them another opportunity. Earlier, Ian alluded to some of our facilities, our sports factory. We've got our sports core complexes. I also see these bikes as something being very critical in terms of locations like that. For example, when we have people coming to some of our sports tournaments and they have some downtime, if there's a bike, they can pick it up and explore some of our regions. And this might be a tool to have them come one time for a tournament, but then come back just to explore our community. And then that's an opportunity to provide our region to put our best foot forward and to attract dollars in various aspects.
I think it will go a long way to increase the visibility of cycling in the community, not least, for two reasons: the number of people that will be on bikes out and about, and two, because obviously those bikes are really, really visible. Like they're made to be seen, and so it will be hard to miss them if someone is out and about. I do think it will also pretty quickly bring us up against, we will as a community begin to see the weaknesses in the culture as far as how people view bicycles on the streets, and we'll start to see pretty quickly the places where people they feel safe to ride a bike like that, and where they might say, I'm feel really great on this road, but then I'm going to turn and I need to get there, and this is the direct way, but I do not feel safe on this street. So we're going to have a lot more information, as not just the data, but like people's feelings and expressing those feelings, and motorists too will have feelings about that as well. So it's going to give us an opportunity to have some really pretty instant feedback about how we're doing and where we can make improvements.
Yeah, gosh, there's not much left to talk about. I agree with everything that's been said. So we're all friends in the room, right? I can be candid. I'm going to be candid about my first response to the fact that Lime Bike was coming here. It was initially excitement. I was really excited, but it was followed immediately by this trepidation. I was concerned. I was concerned that we lacked the appropriate infrastructure. I was concerned that we lacked the appropriate culture for the bikes to be used safely and effectively. And I had some sleepless nights, thinking about that. Is this going to set us back? Are users of Lime Bikes going to be adversely affected in a way that will damage cycling culture, that will impede our progress as a cycling-friendly community? But I think that if we wait for cycling culture to catch up to where it should be, to where it is in so many other progressive areas of this country, well, we may be waiting for a long time. And I think, as Jennifer said, having these bikes here and having people out on the streets using them, creating that visibility, is the ultimate form of advocacy for cycling culture, both as recreation and for transportation. So I think it's a really great thing, and I think it will help bring about fundamental, material, positive, transformative change to the community with respect to how we develop our infrastructure and how our community members look and feel and view cyclists, how they fit into our transportation model.
If I could add one little bit about that, a bike share is a significant risk, I think, for a community for all of those reasons. I had the same trepidation that you did about that. And so it's really going to be up to us as citizens to speak up for the good things about it, and when mistakes happen, which they will, you probably, if you follow it on social media, all of the people saying, oh, they're going to end up in the river, oh, they're going to, all of these things, mistakes are going to happen, and it's going to be up to us who care about bicycle facilities and who care about this system to improving and increasing, to say, you know what, it's okay to take a little risk, we're moving towards better things, and there's going to be a period of time where it's hard and it doesn't look great and there's going to be mistakes, but we can get to better places.
Yeah, and I'll give Jason and his company a shout out here. They're smart people, and this is a business for profit. Undoubtedly, they've done the market studies, they've looked at our community, and they've been in similar communities, and they know what works and what doesn't work. And so at the end of the day, I thought, we've just got to trust them to come into the community knowing that it's going to work here. I really think that it will.
Great, thank you. So some common themes that we're hearing is continued education with regard to bicycle and pedestrian planning initiatives throughout the region. Certainly that element of connectivity between the various modes, and really just having an opportunity to choose how to move about within the region. So those are some really great points. Earlier in the presentation, there was discussion about citizens' roles, advocacy groups, and other community organizations. So, Jennifer, how does iBike Rockford fit into the picture of promoting bicycle and pedestrian planning within the region? And could you tell us a little bit more about some of the subcommittees or committees of iBike Rockford?
Sure. So iBike Rockford actually started as a Facebook group several years ago, just as a place for cyclists to come together for camaraderie and support and to get together and have a good ride. Last year, or about a year and a half ago, a group of citizens spearheaded by one gentleman who, I'm not sure he's in the room tonight, but I'll save his name, but spearheaded a petition and effort to get the multi-use path onto Spring Creek. And sort of like the burst of advocacy that happened around that led to us saying we need this to be like a real thing. We need this to be a real group. So iBike Rockford started meeting a year ago this month, formally, to work towards, and our mission statement is working so that more people of all ages, abilities, and biking styles can say, I bike Rockford for fun, recreation, and transportation. So we have 3 subcommittees, political, legal, safety and education, and events and promotion. Each of them is fairly self-explanatory by the titles of those committees. So the idea that we're touching sort of every aspect of people's lives, we have fun events for them to come and participate in, education efforts for youth and everyone else, and then political, legal, that we're keeping track of what's going on with planning in the community and speaking up for and on behalf of cyclists. I'm really pleased that the group has had representatives from all types of cycling groups. It was really intentional, to be not just road bikers, not just urban cyclists, not just mountain bikers, members, but to try and bring everyone together, because we have way more to lose if we don't work together than we can gain with our strength like that. So, all that to say, we're starting up regular meetings again in March. March 15th is our next large group iBike Rockford meeting. Follow us on Facebook. There's like 1,500 people that do, and there are lots of opportunities for you to come to these meetings and get involved with the committees, to plan fun events, to speak at council meetings, to write your alderman, whatever it takes, to get this stuff done. So.
Thank you. Thanks. So for the education component that we had discussed in the presentation, from each of your respective organizations, with that education process of bicycle and pedestrian planning, but then implementation, what are some of your thoughts on that? And this is open to the entire panel.
On cycling education, I think there are some groups that do a great job with cycling education and cycling advocacy that aren't represented on the panel, because they are focused primarily on cycling for recreational purposes rather than for transportation, and a lot of their focus is on riding off-road rather than on-road. And so I just want to give them a shout out. The Rockford Area Mountain Biking Association, I see their president in the audience, Steve Forrest, is here, and I know there are a number of members in the audience. The Rock River Multi-Sport Club, also a cycling for recreation group of cycling enthusiasts. Both those clubs do a lot for education and advocacy by virtue of hosting events here in Rockford that get a lot of publicity. They get some media coverage and promote cycling in a way that leads to healthier lifestyles and healthier choices. So I wanted to give them credit. Also, I want to just go off script for just a second, because I want to make sure that my comments earlier about our lack of infrastructure for Lime Bike and cycling don't reflect poorly on City Hall and the current administration. I see Scott Capivilla and Jeremy Carter in the audience here, both representatives of the City of Rockford, and I want to give them a shout out too, because I think that the city has really taken a turn in the right direction, in a positive direction with respect to cycling infrastructure and their attitude about cyclists. So I think we've got a lot of great groups, governmental groups, volunteer groups, all coalescing around this common goal of making cycling more prevalent in our everyday lives. Again, for recreation, for transportation, competition, for any old reason.
So I'll jump in terms of from an education standpoint, having been involved with the bicycle lane strategy in Chicago and working between Chicago Department of Transportation and the CTA, and the education component was huge there, right? They also implemented their bike share program at the same time. So there's a lot of concerns around how to ride safely, how to interact with traffic safely, and especially with a lot of new users to the community, and creates a real dynamic environment in which you're trying to indoctrinate both people into what the geography is, but also how to use that bike, then how to use it safely, and then how to interact around different modes of transportation. And I think that's obviously a big challenge, and obviously for a public service provider, transportation provider like ourselves, how we interact with those bicyclists safely as well. On our system, for example, we have all of our fixed route vehicles that have bike racks, right? And so we have an educational component around that. So that working with the various advocacy groups, and really who do a tremendous job from a grassroots perspective of reaching out and building that culture and trying to inform folks about how to do that safely, and having the infrastructure, how to utilize that safely from a public transit perspective. I think that really the education thing and focusing around that safe interaction and how to connect in and use facilities that are available to you is incredibly important. And that's one of the objectives of our agency is how to build those partnerships and how to increase that communication, the sharing of information, so that we do a better job of connecting in and teaching those users who are attempting to use it from an intermodal perspective, and really kind of fostering those relationships and that information sharing and that educational component.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. As we are getting close to the end of the panel discussion, are there any final thoughts that either of you have with regard to overall bicycle and pedestrian planning and where you'd like to see it moving forward?
Well, I've got one. You're all shocked, right? I've got something else to say. So I want to take this opportunity to just throw a shameless plug in for the Rockford Park District, because we've got some other exciting things going on that I want to talk about. I'm their chief volunteer and cheerleader. There are communities throughout the country, even in the Midwest, that have created entire economies on the back of cycling as a tourism, as a mode of tourism. And I think that's something that we can do here in Winnebago County, given our proximity to the city of Chicago, Madison, Milwaukee, given the vast number of acres of open space that we have. I think we have a really unique opportunity to create an economic engine here on the backs of cyclists who are also tourists. I'm one of those guys. I load up my wife and my 3 kids and our bicycles, and we take vacations that are centered around our mountain biking. We go places and we spend our money. We camp in an RV and ride our bikes, and we love that. And there are communities in the Midwest that rake in millions and millions of dollars on their trail systems from people like myself and my family. So, recognizing this, the Rockford Park District took the initiative, thanks to a very generous donor, to go visit some of these communities and see what examples of really premier, professionally designed trail systems look like. And, we wanted to know, could we replicate that here in Winnebago County, specifically at a Park District facility? We've got a bunch of great parks in our network. The Rockford Park District has about 5,000 acres of parks, and one of my favorite parks is Atwood Park down there. Look at Becky. Yeah, wave Becky. Becky Stokes is the director of outdoor education at Atwood Park. And we, as some of you in the audience probably know, we've been engaged in this really years-long planning process where we've taken input from the public. We've hired professionals to design a really premier off-road multi-use trail system for Atwood Park. It would be something that would be professionally designed, professionally built, and would lead to us getting a ride rating. We talked earlier, Ashley talked earlier about the League of Illinois League of Bicyclists. Was that the entity? League of Illinois Bicyclists? American, sorry. And then, so there are a couple of agencies that rate communities based upon various strengths. There's another entity called the International Mountain Biking Association. It's well known to mountain bikers. And they do sort of the same thing. And they designate certain cities ride centers. And these designations lead to people coming into their communities and spending a lot of money. We've seen this play out in communities throughout the country. So we hope that our plans for Atwood could eventually lead to a ride designation for Winnebago County, for the Rockford area. We hope that this plan will ultimately lead to connecting Atwood Park to other forest preserves and state parks. I mean, ultimately, we've got the Kishwaukee River corridor that bisects Atwood Park and then runs north and west. We hope that we could connect Atwood all the way up to Rock Cut State Park, creating a network of trails that would be in excess of 50 miles. You could ride 50 miles off-road in the woods without ever having to ride the same trail twice. I mean, that's like nirvana for me. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and just make everyone aware of our plans. Mountain biking is a trend that's on the uptick. We recognize that at the Rockford Park District. Our surveys tell us that. The national data tells us that. And we are precariously close to making a really big announcement about the progress we've made on Atwood and where we hope to be at the end of this year. So stay tuned.
I'll do a tease. Did you hear that? I think I called a tease. So think next we're moving into the funding and implementation
Yes.
discussion, and any, conversation about these types of things wouldn't be complete without talking about how are we going to pay for what we want to do. And we think we all know that the resources are limited. There's not an unlimited pool of money that's just available to do all these great things that we want to do. And so it's imperative, and thankfully we have an agency like R1PC that can lead multiple agencies talking to each other about what they're doing. So we're not being duplicative, we can be more efficient that way. We don't have the luxury of making decisions in isolation. We should be trying to maximize the decisions that we're doing to meet multiple goals. So cycling isn't just about transportation, it's about health, right? I attended the Rockford Health Council just released their 2017 Healthy Communities Study. And so the results were not great. There's not really good outcomes for our communities. And so to say, when you're in that room, I've got my health hat on, but I also have on my transportation hat. We can't make these decisions in isolation. So that's a charge for each of us, for whether or not you have planning or, municipal accolades or like letters after your name. Whatever hat you're wearing, whatever circles you are in, if this is something that's important to you, how do the decisions that you're making at your workplace or in your other volunteer roles help to support this goal of becoming a more bikeable and walkable community? So for me, I'm a relatively new member of the Rockford Zoning Board of Appeals, and so as I'm making those decisions, I need to think about how could we make this better? We're not just making these decisions in isolation, but how can we use what we approve in those meetings to also improve the bikeability and walkability of our community? So that's that.
I'll just quickly, one of the things from a funding standpoint that we try to be mindful of is, one, as far as some of our existing assets, to be mindful that going forward that we put dollars towards maintaining those. For example, the Mississippi Riverfront bike path. We on a regular basis make sure that we have capital dollars going back to that to resurface that, as well as in recent years we've upgraded the lighting. So that's one of the key things, existing assets, make sure we're using dollars wisely to extend the life of those. And then for some of the new facilities that are being proposed, make sure that not only do we have dollars on the front end to do the construction, but again, going forward, that they're sustainable, that we have sources of income to do the ongoing maintenance and to extend the life of those.
So from a funding standpoint, on our side of the business, we have opportunities to tap into funding that maybe other agencies do not. And so as we work together and partner together, leveraging those opportunities to avail ourselves of those funds and to put those to meaningful infrastructure improvements, I think is part of this planning process very critical. And obviously we've gone through a prioritization of streets and sidewalks, and for us, where that filters down to is at bus stop locations and enhancing those locations that make meaningful connection points for whether it's Lime Bike or other bicycle users to connect into our system. So I think as we continue to work together and move forward in this process, it's that partnership and leveraging those resources and funds to put them in the right place.
Great. Thank you. It's been a very insightful discussion. It's a great segue into the next session. They'll be discussing the implementation of funding. So I just wanted to have a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate it.
And thank you, Tim, Ian, Jennifer, Michael, for all being here. Kind of already hit on funding. Tim, you've one of the funding things, and Cindy's going to try to put it up. So in the back of the room, I was just asked, in the middle of this presentation, okay, this is great. How are we going to all pay for it? And that is the tough lift on all this. Earlier today, I made the comment to someone, anybody can get a planning grant. It's very easy to. It's still hard work to find the grant and get it. It's a lot harder to get an implementation grant. And that's true. We are really good at planning. I think Sydney and her team did a very good job on this plan. But implementation's trickier. And so there's a number of ways to pay for this stuff. It is competitive. And to quickly go over it, you have the traditional local source. You have taxes and bonds. You have everybody's capital improvement program. You have the local traditional way of paying for items. You also have the state, and that's why I just invoked Tim here, because Tim's really good at writing and procuring money for the Park District in what's called an ITEP grant, and the last one successful was Jefferson Street. Yep, and so the pedway under Jefferson Street Bridge. And, you know, that is a funding source we can rely on annually. It's typically offered by the state of Illinois, and we as a region, whether it's Winnebago County, the city of Rockford, the Park District, are constantly going after that pool of money from the state of Illinois. Our map and the RPC has access to one of those federal line items, the Transportation Alternatives Program, often used acronym is TAP. The RMAP board of those 8 people we've referenced earlier basically get to appropriate close to $350,000 a year. Right now we have a balance of about $900,000 towards projects locally. The last local project that our organization gave real construction dollars to was the shared use pathway along Alpine Road between Harlem and 173. And so both through RMAP and our access to federal money and being able to write grants for additional federal money, both every organization and the RPC partnering hopefully with those organizations to go after that state money, the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program. And then as I saw in the latest round, at least in Rockford in their CIP, a larger emphasis on these shared use and bicycle pedestrian facilities. That is pretty much what is available to us in today's world. And again, I'll hand it off to questions. I'm always willing to answer questions as well, but this plan is a good one. It calls out good action steps, but this is pretty much your funding source. I also want to call out the RDP. Brian Davis is here, one of the leaders of it. The Lime Bike initiative was very important in showing the intent that we can't always look to government to fund things. We had a lot of options going back to 2016 to implement a bike share program that would have involved a large capital outlay up front by the city of Rockford and other governments. And I'm really proud, not just of Rockford, but of all the governments who have rallied around this cause, who have turned around discussions and strategies and trying to have one set of rules for the bike share operator to run by across jurisdictional lines, so then the user of these bikes aren't confused by, well, the rules here in McChesney might be different than Rockford. But part of that is that because we didn't have to give any available foundation money, private sector money, or government money to Lime Bike, we can work with organizations like the RRDP and try to raise that money towards infrastructure that will support Lime Bike being a success. Bicycle racks, education, hopefully some on-street adjustments to allow room for these bicycles to be parked. So on Lime Bike, it doesn't stop with just getting a private sector company to invest their capital into our market, hoping that'll be a success. They need to turn a profit, right? But it is working with organizations like RRDP and the Park District to try to support that with philanthropy and private sector investment and complement it. So again, I'm not really giving you much that you'd already didn't know, but wanted to clarify that the plan isn't really a means to a funding end. We have to rely on those sources up there and prioritize those sources to start implementation. And I hope that I covered that well for the panel. Is there anything I missed? No, with that, I guess whoever's going to take the Q&A, David, is that you?
Yeah.
I'll let you guys, you've all been patient. Thank you for being here, and let the questions start. Thank you.
First question is, what are plans to increase lighting on bike paths? So that's open to anyone on the stage. What are plans to increase lighting on bike paths?
You know, I Tim and I are both here from the Rockford Park District, kind of different roles. As board president, I'm kind of more of a big picture guy, policy. We set policy and pass budgets. Tim is much more steeped in the details of the operational aspects of the Rockford Park District. But I can tell you, from a board perspective, we recognize that lighting on paths is important, and that's one of the reasons that we sought and received a grant to install the new LED lighting along our riverfront path, which again is one of our really our busiest and most used amenities. But we, as far as I know, we don't have plans for any other lighting projects. But Tim, can you correct me if I'm mistaken?
No, typically right now with a lot of, lighting, like a lot of things for the Park District, it's infrastructure, and a key portion of our budget annually is that repair and replacement of capital features for the Park District. Policy-wise, when there's plans for new path or trail systems, by default, we try to provide lighting just for that very nature. That's something that our citizens would like, when they're using a path, that lighting. And to Ian's point, as far as the LED lighting that we've just put in, that's one of the things that we research on a regular basis. If there's opportunities for more cost-efficient pieces of, whether it's lighting, whether it's other pieces of infrastructure, that's one thing that we always are on the watch for to, again, make those dollars stretch further.
What are the next steps to connecting current paths and the financial sources? Kind of hit on this. Is there anything to add to that in terms of what the next steps to connecting the current paths? Things, Sydney, you talked about is filling the gaps or closing the gaps?
So those next steps, we've identified those gaps and where they exist. And so the next steps is really finding the funding to make those connections, as well as determining what is the best connection to those two locations. As I mentioned earlier, not all streets are going to be the most suitable. So identifying areas and connections that are those low-stress, safe routes for those connections, identifying those, identifying the funding, and then really moving into that feasibility engineering phases of the project. And so that's kind of the next steps. We've done part of that by using the data analysis to identify those gaps in some of the priority corridors or proposed corridors that could fill those gaps. It's that next step, however, is that funding and then feasibility.
Could I add a little piece to that? So one thing that would be a huge hope that I have, and I think some of us at the iBike Rockford share it, is that we get better at doing like quick, flexible projects that are just tests. So instead of saying, let's spend $1 million on a mile of a protected bike lane, let's test it with whatever, painted tires, cones, whatever it takes to just try it, see how it works, let people get comfortable with it, and then come back and put in permanent infrastructure. A lot of communities, if you follow cycling at all online and stuff, there was sort of a trend over the last year of people that would put like glue toilet plungers to the ground to make a sort of fake protected bike lane, just as a sort of guerrilla advocacy. I shouldn't use that word guerrilla when I'm speaking as an advocate, but just to say, like, we think that this could work here, and here's like a really cheap, easy way for us to do that. Now what that takes though is flexibility and a measure of risk that we're comfortable with, and speaking for the city officials who are in the room, risk is maybe something that they're not willing to take on, and so we as citizens need to be able to say, hey, we're comfortable with a little bit of risk, we're comfortable with spending a little bit of money, and maybe it's going to fail, but it's $10,000, not $1 million, right? So let's try some things out, see how it works, get people comfortable. It's not dissimilar to the bike share being, just we're testing it, we're seeing how this works, and then we can put in some more expensive things when it's shown that it's needed and stuff like that. So.
Great, thank you. Next question, if anyone is able to provide an update on the Spring Creek Path. And if no one is not able to, we can follow up on that one.
I mean, I think there's some people in the audience who could speak to it, but from what I am aware of, there was, in this current capital improvement program for the city of Rockford, $60,000 has been designated for further study, for the feasibility study and beginning of the plans to see what it could possibly look like and get us a better sense of what the completed path would actually cost, because that's the big question. So maybe there might be someone from the city who would want to correct me, but I believe that's where it stands at the moment.
Good. Okay, you're good. We're good.
Cool.
Fact checked.
And we'll stay with you, Jennifer, on this one. You already talked about, what is iBike, you described iBike Rockford. This person says, how do I get involved?
Yeah, follow us on Facebook. If you don't do that, that's all right. Come up to me, talk to me afterwards. I'll get you signed up for our email contact list. But we're going to have this year, we're starting regular every month. We'll have a large group meeting where anyone is welcome to come and hear what's going on, what events are coming up, not just that our group sponsors, but all biking groups in the community. Yeah, but really, like, those are the main two ways. Facebook is the best place, and then get on our email contact list otherwise. So.
We have another question related to the Spring Creek bike path. And for this person, just in terms of the challenges, the possibilities of alternative routes, potential problems with alignment, property line adjustments. So that's more of a comment, and we'll take that one and for sure pass that on to the City of Rockford team. The other part was the map shows dotted line on Country Club Lane near Rockford Country Club. Is this a viable path? If that person's okay for time, that's another one that we could defer unless someone does want to respond. No? Good? Okay. Next one is, my wife and I have visited Sports Core 2 on bike, and about 40-50 times per year. The addition of the Riverhawk Stadium has helped, but for Perryville to that point is dangerous. We currently ride Riverside. Is there any chance of us working with Mercy Hospital to add paths along that route? We could.
That's really probably a better question. Whoop, I'm sorry, I'm pressing the button. I don't need to do that. It's probably a better question for either the City of Loves Park or the City of Rockford. They control that thoroughfare. I think Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Riverside, is that a City of Rockford road? Is that a Loves Park road? A state road?
Yes.
Riverside is from Material Avenue all the way to I-90 is under the jurisdiction of the County of Winnebago.
County.
I-90 out to the Boone County line is the City of Los Sparks.
Okay, all right. So you've got a couple of different jurisdictions there that come into play that would be, relevant to talk to if you wanted to make that happen.
So we'll pass that question.
Of course, along with the private property owners. I mean, Mercy owns a huge swath of land that we can all see from Riverside, from I-90, that stretches all the way down to Sports Core 2.
I would agree with those comments, and working with the jurisdictions, the municipalities that own and maintain the roadway facility, as well as the partner jurisdictions. But one of the important points of the planning process that we have regarding transportation is that it's continuously evolving. So looking at demand as we move forward for particular routes, that's something that we can then add to our planning documents and discuss with our partner agencies on that regional basis. So comments like that are very helpful in looking at what other potential routes need to be looked at and assessed.
Great, thank you. This one is not so much a question, but a comment. Or as a city with profound financial challenges, much needed infrastructure is in the distant future. The most immediate improvement would be improved respect between drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. So getting at in terms of the education piece of the 4 E's that you talked about. So we'll pass that one along as well. For Lime Bike, will you play a role in safety education of rules on the road, i.e. correct side of street direction, on or off sidewalks, etc.?
Yes, of course. So when I alluded to being a part of the community, that's in all aspects. So that's making sure that people are using our service in a safe manner through community education in terms of like physically holding events and partnering with community organizations that can help us educate the community, but then also within our app and with our technology alluding to certain restrictions and how bikes should and shouldn't be used. So yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you. Well, that's all the questions we received. Join me in thanking our presenters, our panelists. Great job. multiple ways to stay connected, of course, through Region 1, Transform Rockford, the advocacy groups. Some of you are part of those groups. But this is, again, a part of how we are actually becoming a bike and pedestrian-friendly community. So a year ago, we were here and we were starting this planning process, and plan is complete, implementation is happening. So just encourage you to follow all these different organizations that individuals are representing. So thank you and have a great night.